Hey everyone, it's me, Wasabi, and welcome back to another review. Today we're checking out the G-Wolves HTX Ultra 8K, and this was sent over to me by G-Wolves to check out and share my honest opinions with you guys. So inside the box, you actually get quite a lot. A set of G-Wolves grip tapes, these are super grippy, an instruction manual, dot spacers, 2 sponge pads for if you ever need to replace the battery, 2 dust protection stickers, 2 full sets of full-size skates, plus a very generous set of dot skates, the 8K receiver and a USB-C cable, an additional USB-C charging cable, the HTX Ultra 8K mouse itself, strap attachments for the case, and that's pretty much all that's included inside the box. So this one is the latest addition to the G-Wolves HTX series. Now if you've liked previous HTX models, this one is interesting because it brings small but meaningful refinements, plus some of G-Wolves' latest tech that they are introducing to their new mice. Most notably the Huano SPDT switch implementation, and I'll say this now, it feels as fast as any other mouse that I've tried before, but the click experience is good. Also, if you like mice where your fingers are very close to the mouse pad, this is a good option too. So at $139, it's actually cheaper than the HTX Mini 8K. I have a review of that one coming up, but if you can't wait, I would just say it right now that I would pick this HTX Ultra 8K over the Mini any day of the week. But you know, it's really personal preference. On top, we've got the hexagon pattern with the G-Wolves logo up front. Not a fan of the hexagon pattern at all, but it is what it is. And on the bottom is very clean and minimal, but still well engineered to support the PCB without compromising strength. And the most impactful thing you'll notice is that this has a forward sensor position. For the build quality, the shell feels like a very solid piece of plastic. And for how thin and light it is, it's surprisingly strong. Button fitment is excellent. The main buttons feel like they're part of the shell rather than separate pieces. Side buttons are also well fitted with no wobble, and the scroll wheel is fitted in well enough. It's kind of thin and looks a little fragile, but I would guess they prioritize weight saving for this one. There is no coating on this mouse like most G-Wolves mice. For me, on dry days, the mouse feels slippery, and on days when my hands get sweaty, it still feels slippery. I would highly recommend using grip tapes, and the ones in the box are super grippy. What I can appreciate about the lack of coating on a G-Wolves mouse is that I can wipe this thing hard with a damp cloth or even with a tiny bit of dish soap without having to worry about ruining the coating. On the website, the listed weight is 32.1 grams. My unit came in at 32.2 grams. That is actually pretty impressive by today's standards, especially considering the size and structure of this mouse. Now before I continue with the shape and how it feels from my experience, to put things into perspective, my hand size is 17.5 by 9. First, this is not a large mouse. Size-wise, it's almost the same as my Final Mouse URX Medium and noticeably smaller than my Razer Viper V3 Pro and the GPX Superlight 2. Like most HTX mice, it's a low-profile shape with an extremely low front. It has very defined comfort grooves. My index and middle finger feels like it sinks right in, and like all HTX mice, it's got the side button shapes that G-Wolves has stuck with since earlier models. Extending my ring and pinky finger forward, there is a decent amount of height to rest on the side, considering how low the buttons sink in. But it flares out too wide up front for me, and I do struggle to have a good grip there. This one feels the best when resting my fingers closer to the midpoint of the shape, and also the sides are angled inward, which makes lifting this mouse very easy. Then the shape opens up towards the rear. For my hand size, there is just enough space to rest my thumb, but if I fully lay my thumb flat, it already starts grazing the side buttons. For most people, you probably want to grip this mouse with the tip of your thumb to avoid accidental presses. The hump of this one doesn't fully support my palm, it's more like halfway up. But with that said, it's enough to support the claw and relaxed claw grip, and even a palm grip for some users, though I wouldn't recommend it. Then the rear spreads out, and that supports the wraparound of my thumb very nicely. For the grip styles, this mouse to me feels the most natural for the claw grip style. Relaxed claw and palm grip work too, but my hand always defaults back to the claw grip. And for the fingertip grip style, the rear gets in the way a bit too much, at least for my hand size. Overall, this shape feels nimble, precise, and you get good stability. It's not a mouse I call super comfortable for extended hours of work or gaming. It's really one of those shapes that feels purpose-built for performance, but I would say that it still manages to be easy to pick up and notice the benefits. The main clicks use Huano transparent transparent orange shell 80 million SPDT mechanical switches. Not gonna dwell on the SPDT benefits so much because honest to god, this feels as fast as any of the recent G-Wolves mice that I've tried. To me, the biggest factor is how it feels, and from my experience, these feel fantastic to click on. Not heavy, not feather light, just very clean, tactile, and tight. It feels light enough to spam and you get some punch to it. Honestly, I enjoy the experience of these switches as much as I enjoy Huano transparent blue shell pink dot switches in many of the good mice that I own. Side buttons are excellent, no wobble, almost no pre-travel or post-travel, and surprisingly light to press. They're very easy to spam as well and feel well tuned. The scroll wheel on the other hand is arguably my least favorite aspect of this mouse. While it is not awful, it ultimately comes down to personal taste. I lean towards options that have a bit more substance and character within the scroll. The material here just feels somewhat flimsy and the defined steps are lacking. The experience feels like there isn't enough force for the encoder to roll to the next step easily, and it often feels like it can get stuck between steps, which creates that sort of mushy feeling. On a positive note, the rubber grip is quite effective and the middle click requires a reasonable amount of pressure. Now here's a quick sound test to give you a better idea of how this mouse sounds. The stock dot skates are very good. On cloth pads, the glide is fast and smooth. Also because the dots are quite small and you get very minimal resistance. One thing to note, due to the length and shape of the mouse, if you rest your palm towards the back, it will push the tail down into the mouse pad. So adding another dot skate to the tail end will help to reduce drag quite significantly. On the glass mouse pad, the stock skates work perfectly fine. The default 4 dot setup is totally usable, but of course, it won't last as long as skates that are specially made for glass pad use. And also I had no issues running the low lift-off distance with the stock skates on a glass pad, which is the Wallhack SP5. So this mouse has a POR 3950 sensor and you get 8K polling rate both wired and wirelessly. These days 8K for both is pretty common. What I noticed is that because this mouse is already so light, using a wire doesn't feel like much of a compromise. And for the battery life, it really depends on the settings that you use. I did ask them for the control test results, but they didn't give me an answer. I would assume that they never bothered to formally test, but from my experience using this at 4K polling rate with competitive mode on and motion sync off, mine drops to 50% from 100 after a full day of work and gaming. But to be completely fair, I start my days at 5:30 in the morning and I try to wrap things up by 11 PM in the evening, so my days are pretty long. So this mouse uses G-Wolves web-based software like all of their newer mice. You get all the essential mouse settings here: DPI, polling rate, button remapping, sensor rotation, and a competitive mode that prioritizes performance at the cost of battery life. This is quite a normal thing that you find with most mice today. What's new for G-Wolves is the SPDT functionality, which a lot of people first associated with endgame gear mice. The benefit is a lower click latency, and yes, you can tune this pretty aggressively in the software. You're able to adjust the debounce settings right down to the bone. On my units, the lowest that I could go with minimal double clicking was 0100, but just keep in mind that every switch is slightly different, so this is something that you need to experiment with on your own. For most people though, myself included, just use preset A and enjoy gaming. If that's not convincing, all the gameplay footage that you see in this video today is using preset A with the 4K Hz polling rate. The HTX Ultra 8K combines a forward sensor, low profile buttons, and a 32-gram feather light weight, and that brings fingertip level precision to a more standard shape. What stood out for me is the aim speed because the sensor sits directly between my fingertips, so every movement feels very direct and connected. I particularly love using this in fast-paced games like the finals, and while I usually prefer 50-gram mice for tactical shooters, this 32-gram shape felt surprisingly stable to use in Valorant. By the way, if you're coming from a mouse where the sensor is in the middle or a little further back, this mouse will feel very sensitive at first. What I recommend to help manage that sensitivity is to use a pad with some dynamic friction and stopping power. Me personally, I was using an Artisan Zero Soft for this mouse most of the time. Having that extra surface control prevents the mouse from feeling fidgety, during micro adjustments and tracking. This is not a mouse that immediately feels like it fits like a glove, but it is interesting enough that when I do use other mice, I start to miss this one because of the speed and control that I feel. It just comes off like a touch above the rest. Now to wrap things up, the HTX Ultra 8K is built for pure performance, which is exactly what G-Wolves does with their mice. But while their mice are unique and the build quality is much better, they are just not for everyone. At least not yet. I would say the main drawback is the lack of a coating and the honeycomb texture. Because for an average gamer who isn't a hardcore mouse enthusiast, the experience will be quite polarizing. However, if you can get past this design philosophy, the performance-oriented experience is impressive. By the way, once you get used to this mouse, every other mouse will feel slow in comparison. Would this be my one and only mouse for long hours of work and gaming? Probably not, because it's a bit too low profile for comfort. So instead, I see this as a high-performance specialist product. So responsiveness and precision are where it truly shines. If you're interested to check out this one or any other G-Wolves mouse, visit their website and feel free to use code Wasabi at checkout to save some money, and that also goes to supporting my channel. I would say G-Wolves is headed in a better direction, and the way they approach gaming mouse designs lately is exactly what the industry needs. Some creativity and experimentation. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video or found it helpful, please leave a like and subscribe to support my channel, and I guess I'll see you in the next one.